Climate change researcher from Wits University is warning that tropical cyclones could be headed for our shores. Dr. Jennifer Fitchett has written about this in the latest issue of the South African Journal of Science. Well, she joins us here on Morning News today to explain more about these warnings. Doc, good morning. Should I panic? It sounds like I should panic. It sounds like these things are like fast approaching. Please tell me not.
So that's what the media tends to do when they get hold of climate change news. It's certainly not something to panic about in the next few days. We're looking at what's likely to happen over the next couple of decades and towards the end of the century.
Okay, so only towards the end of the century.
Yeah.
All right, so but let's talk about cyclones and our history of cyclones. I mean, in South Africa, I don't quite remember that we've had, but I don't know, since before my time. When, where, how were we ever hit by cyclones?
So I think only about 3 tropical cyclones have ever directly made landfall on South African coastlines. But we are occasionally affected by tropical cyclones that make landfall on Mozambique. So Tropical Cyclone Dineo last year made landfall in southern Mozambique, and we experienced rainfall across the northern areas of southern Africa. Tropical Cyclone Dando in 2012, and then there were the big ones, Eileen and Des Moines in the 80s and 90s. But those were all actually relatively low magnitude storms. They were category 1 through 3, and the big difference at the moment is that for the first time category 5 storms are forming in the South Indian Ocean.
Okay, so explain to us what a category 5 storm actually is and what's going to happen if and when this happens towards the end of the century.
So any tropical cyclone is ranked according to the Saffir-Simpson scale, which is a measure of the central pressure of the storm for us climatologists, but for people trying to understand the storm day to day, it's really a function of the strength of the wind speed and therefore the likelihood of damage to anyone who's within the vicinity of it, but also the size of the storm. So a category 1 storm has wind speeds of about 120 kilometers an hour and an area of about 100 kilometers, whereas a category 5 storm, we're looking at a minimum wind speed of about 260 kilometers an hour and a radius of 500 kilometers from the center of the storm. So much bigger in their reach and much stronger in terms of the damage.
So just so I can picture this, just tell us in terms of the damage, what kind of damage will a storm like this actually do?
So category 5 storms are supposed to be devastating in their damage. There were 2 of those that made landfall in the United States this year. Both times they evacuated large regions. And Southern Africa doesn't have nearly the adaptation for these kinds of storms, nor the evacuation plans. So when we think about tropical cyclone Des Moines, for example, or even Dineo last year, that was huge numbers of people displaced, very high risk of loss of life, and that escalates significantly as the storms become stronger.
Okay, so it seems that we have enough warning. So will we be able to see these things coming, and then which parts are most likely to be hit? Which parts of, I mean, you mentioned South Africa and Mozambique, but like in Gauteng, what kind of impact would we feel, and who would feel it worst?
So the problem with a category 5 storm is the reach of the storm. It's going to be a very long time before they do reach that southern Mozambique, South Africa area, because Madagascar is creating a buffer for us. Okay. But at the point where they do potentially make landfall in Mozambique, that 500-kilometer radius puts very large areas at risk of flooding, of high wind speeds. Not of the brunt of the storm, but of the greater effects of a large storm system. So Gauteng did experience higher rainfall last year during Tropical Cyclone Dineo. That would be exacerbated under a category 5 storm. But the big problem with these storms is that you get about 3 days warning. We pick them up on satellite imagery when we've got a clear central pressure that we can read and a very clearly defined eye of the storm. And even after that, it's very difficult to determine where that storm's going to move.
So you mentioned South Africa does not have a good enough plan. We wouldn't be prepared for evacuation. So how do we prepare? What do we do?
So it's twofold. The one part of it is trying to make sure that we've got the infrastructure that can withhold the roads, the bridges, the houses if we have a major storm event. So that's increasing the strength of our infrastructure, particularly along coastal regions. And thereafter, the plans are then making sure that we know how to evacuate people, how to warn people that an evacuation is necessary, and then what you do with hundreds of thousands of people potentially who need somewhere to stay to wait out the storm. And it's important to address both of those things concurrently to make sure that if you don't need to evacuate people, you will still have a road system for sort of months and years after the storm.
Okay, so don't panic, but prepare is what
Correct.
you're saying. It's not going to happen right now, towards the end of the century. Thank you very much there, Dr. Jennifer Fitchett, just bringing us those warnings of the Category 5 tropical cyclones that may hit us here in SA at the end of, towards the end of the century.